head over to the bracket and see how things have turned out so far in London here in Top Cut. We have Eduardo, Cunha, and Paul. Chua has one of the top 4 sets.
I'm really excited to see just how everything is going to be going down against such 2 high-caliber players as it's time to head into our first game. Amoonguss and Palkia on Paul's side of the field facing off against this Calyrex Shadow Rider and this Incineroar.
Yeah, I remember Paul in his interview with Anna mentioning that Amoonguss was pretty much irrelevant in that top 8 set because one of the Pokemon had safety goggles, so he couldn't do anything. Now, if he's not worried about that, Amoonguss is here to redirect attacks away, similarly to what we saw in top 8 with the Indeedee female. You're going to, any target, any attack that would go towards the Palkia would instead be redirected to the Amoonguss. However, Eduardo might be okay with that because of his Calyrex Shadow Rider having those psychic attacks like Psyshock or anything. It would go into the Amoonguss, and Paul definitely is aware that it might be coming in that direction.
Comfortable enough to bring it in the matchup, but definitely not comfortable enough to leave it out on the field. It's going to be Incineroar instead. Potential fake out pressure for next turn onto the opposing Incineroar, and it's going to be good in making sure that you're just going to take that fake out and nothing to be happen. The Snarl instead from the Calyrex, instead of going for this damage, instead, this Snarl, it doesn't do much damage-wise, but it does lower the special attack, and that is crucial against this Palkia that has a very strong special attack stat. Now, Spatial Rend into the Calyrex. It is going to bring some damage, but not the most.
Yeah, that was a considerably less damage than Paul would have liked, and on that turn, it was really safe out of Eduardo because you probably expected Amoonguss to switch out because it would not want to take one of those psychic attacks from the Calyrex there. And of course, you don't want to hit it on an Incineroar switch in, who's a dark type who would be immune to it. So right now, Paul is fortunate that he did not Dynamax the Palkia on that turn, because then after the Snarl would have been having that decreased special attack and doing even less damage. And then with Gastrodon here, if you went for a water attack, it would not work.
A Protect and a Swap with a Throat Chop to hit into the Gastrodon instead. Going to be good for damage, and the Incineroar from Eduardo going in the back means it won't be affected by that Throat Chop. But here it is, Twisted Dimensions hitting the field.
One of the best Pokemons for Eduardo in this Trick Room matchup is the Gastrodon, because it is such a naturally slow Pokemon that even when Paul twists the dimensions like this, if Incineroar wants the Parting Shot into, either the Calyrex or whatever, wants to get out and bring Calyrex Ice Rider in safely for it, the Gastrodon can potentially click Yawn. He can actually, I think, typically be faster under the Twisted Dimensions there, so can be a bit of a problem to deal with if you are Paul. So you've gotten the first checklist off. I have set up Trick Room successfully. Didn't cost me anything. My Palkia has had its damage mitigated, though, from that Snarl, and I currently do not have the Calyrex on the field, the Ice Rider, to take advantage of it.
Twisted Dimensions in that Calyrex Shadow Rider, certainly not appreciating anything that the Incineroar or even the Palkia could throw at it, is going to swap in the back and bring Incineroar in its place. Gastrodon is so slow. It's going to make great use of this Trick Room, doing a heap of damage into this Incineroar. It's going to hold on with 18 HP, but the Spatial Rend, it's going to miss.
That is going to miss. That is pretty tough luck for Paul there, as you want to get every amount of damage you can onto these Pokemon, because remember, Paul in top 8, he got those Pokemon down to under half, and even resisted Glacial Lances were getting KOs. So if not, that missed out damage from the Spatial Rend could potentially cost a Glastrier a knockout that would help it start steamrolling with its Chilling Neigh ability. And here's the leftovers reveal on being shown, I should say, on the Gastrodon, to show that if you don't deal with the Gastrodon, it will slowly build its HP back up to full.
Yeah, this Calyrex Ice Rider, since it was able to come onto the field for free since the Incineroar before Parting Shot out, is in a really nice spot to be taking advantage of this Trick Room. There's going to be that Glacial Lance. Gastrodon's going to be nice and protected behind that Protect, but at this point, it's just going to be damage into this Incineroar, trying to get as much mileage out. Considering it's not a very effective attack, it won't have much mileage to it whatsoever. And a Parting Shot in response to make sure that this Calyrex Ice Rider gets neutralized as much as possible.
And that will be the first attack drop, because of it's going to get reset thanks to the White Herb, which is helpful for Paul, because on that previous turn, Eduardo switching out the hard switch into the Incineroar meant that the Calyrex was not on the field for Incineroar to switch it out, because Parting Shot had to take place after. So fortunate for Paul that he is still at neutral attack on this turn with the Zacian on the switch-in.
The switch-in, though, is going to get a flamethrower in response. This Palkia hasn't been really doing the most damage, and even though that could do some work, the Zacian's going to take it very well.
Yeah, that Snarl has been proving dividends for many turns at this point, as we are down to the final 2 turns of Trick Room before he would have to try to set it up. We know that Paul did not bring Porygon in this game 1, as the Amoonguss and Incineroar are the final 2 Pokemon in the back for Paul. So if you don't want to waste a turn with Trick Room on Calyrex, the best way to reset it up would be with Palkia. So you got to make sure it sticks around long enough and not letting the Zacian just attack it with a Play Rough and knocking it out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Zacian, though, does have to make sure that it's sticking around past the Trick Room and set itself up for the best possible situation. And that's exactly what Paul's thinking as well, trying to get that damage into the slot. That was a double target into the Zacian. So well protected, and that's a turn of Trick Room wasted. And
now we're down to the last turn of Trick Room. You have now successfully intimidated Calyrex Ice Rider, this time because of Gastrodon switching out there into the Incineroar. So now -1 attack for the Calyrex is going to be doing less damage to both of these Pokemon. However, Zacian and Incineroar still don't want to take a high horsepower, even if it has been intimidated. And by Zacian protecting on this previous turn, that means it's going to be very difficult to try to go for a double protect on this turn, on this last and final turn of Trick Room. So if you leave yourself open to an attack like the high horsepower or a potential attack from the Palkia, you can be at risk of getting knocked out.
At least it's not going to be from the Calyrex Ice Rider this turn, as it is going to swap into the back, bringing Incineroar in. Nice opportunity to make sure when you bring it back in, it can be at full attack, as well as getting that Intimidate onto the opposing Zacian. A parting shot in response from Eduardo into the Palkia to have a nice pivot, which should be really nice at the end of the turn when Trick Room is expired.
Yeah, and brave turn from Eduardo to not switch out on this last turn of Trick Room, because you maybe anticipated Calyrex switching out, but the Zacian is not punished for it as much as he would have been.
Another round of Flamethrower into the Zacian, even less damage. But
burn!
The burn coming out is going to make an impact. The damage is going to be so much less, and even that hit into this Palkia doing nothing. Now you can't really capitalize off of that great attack stat Zacian normally has now that the Trick Room is gone.
Yeah, now the Zacian was waiting for this moment to have the Twisted Dimensions over, back to normal, back to being super speedy, but at the cost of your attack stat being halved by the burn there from Flamethrower. I think Paul was trying to fish for that the entire time, since he knows Palkia is -2 special attack, is not doing damage anyway. I might as well get a burn.
Yeah, and the burn is going to be absolutely massive. The Astral Barrage hitting both targets and doing a good amount. Now this Behemoth Blade, considering the burn, considering everything, and considering it's an Amoonguss on the other side of the field, it's not going to be making too much damage. And now a free opportunity to just go ahead and set this Trick Room right back up. You had one turn to capitalize off of the fact that the speed was in your favor, and it's gone.
Yeah, and it's still all 4 Pokemon hanging around for both of these trainers here, as they are 6 turns into this match. That's not something you typically see in VGC. Usually there's a couple of KOs by now because this game is pretty fast-paced, but these trainers are taking their time.
A lot of pivoting, a lot of making sure that you're set up for success, which is really nice considering all the different options to be dropping the attack and special attack of the opposing Pokemon. We got to see the Incineroar come in. We see the Zacian leave, Incineroar come in. There's a couple of turns that we keep seeing repeated. You want to make sure that when you go for that Dynamax, that you're in the most opportune spot and you're not going to be just stuck in wasting it.
And the Calyrex is very scared of a Spore under Trick Room, but Paul does not go for that.
Instead, it'll be the side Pollen Puff, and that is going to bring so much health back to this Incineroar on the fresh swap in. A great use of the turn. There's been no KOs so far, and if Paul's going to be able to have the ability to heal his own Pokemon, the KO might be a little even further on the horizon.
Yeah, now it's going to be even harder to get a knockout because Pollen Puff is going to be able to recover your teammates' health there, similarly to Heal Pulse. And we've seen Porygon a lot of times take advantage of underspeeding things in Trick Room and recovering to get its health back up, just so it is such a problem and so difficult to knock out. Amoonguss can do that same thing with the Pollen Puff, helping its teammates.
And of course, Amoonguss being able to swap in and out with Regenerator, you can get your own health back in that sort of fashion. So it's going to leave the field. Palkia coming in, Zacian for Eduardo. Every turn, these trainers just keep going back and forth with how they want to be having their board state condition. And with Incineroar now, Throat Chop on the other side, this could start to be an advantage, all things considered, but no, it's Throat Chop for a Throat Chop. This one, though, targeted into the Zacian.
Yeah, the Zacian takes that pretty well. You can kind of put some of that damage from the burn with the Throat Chop and say you did a little bit more there, but still not enough. And these two trainers, you know, they're on the world stage. They're here in top 4. Everybody's focusing on this match, so you might as well let it sink in and stay here as long as you can. The thing I worry for both of these trainers is every Pokemon is getting chipped to such low points that either Calyrex can start getting knockouts on their spread attacks, either that Glacial Lance or the Astral Barrage. If you get these Pokemon low enough, that could be the difference from those Chilling Neigh or Grim Neigh boosts to knock out the next attacker.
Yeah, what has been such a slow game could be absolutely disastrous in one single turn. The second that one of those Calyrex is in an opportune position. Eduardo, though, looking to maybe try to apply a little bit of that pressure now. The damage that has been done on his side of the board, especially with the Zacian, having that burn is not fantastic. And this Max Incineroar coming out is definitely a way to turn up the heat and try and get a good, powerful move off onto Paul's side of the field. It'll be the Max Darkness, and it's going to be hitting into this Palkia, bringing it just down to 9 HP.
This is the best option for Eduardo left because everything else has been hindered so much, and Incineroar's still pretty healthy. The Palkia is going to regain health too.
The recovery never ends. The Wiki Berry, and now firing off attack. Incineroar at the double HP is going to be taking that considerably well. But these Pokemon are so stubborn. They're not going down no matter what.
No matter how much we want to see a knockout. The Trick Room is about to expire again. That is how long this match has been going on, and it's still 4 Pokemon each. This Incineroar Dynamaxing was very nice from Eduardo. Like as we mentioned, it's going to double his HP, so he's going to have even more survivability, as well as having that access to Max Darkness or whatever attacks it wants to go for. It really seemed like it was the best slot. I'm done intimidating. I'm done fake out. Done parting shot. It's time to do damage.
We'll have to see where the damage is targeted, though, because the Incineroar from Paul's end switching in lieu of the Palkia will take either of those hits pretty well. Finally, though, Amoonguss, one thing that it loves to do in this Trick Room is being able to go for that Spore. It is so slow, and it's going to be able to go for the Spore into the Gastrodon, also notoriously slow. Now the Max Flare from Incineroar to hit into this Amoonguss. It will take it down, but not after an impact's already been made on the field.
The Spore is definitely better than Yawn because you're able to get to sleep immediately in this situation compared to a Gastrodon who has to click Yawn and then wait for your next attack to put you to sleep. So you get a lot more immediate value from that Spore on the last turn of Trick Room. Now Paul is able to bring in his Calyrex on this turn next to his Incineroar on the field. It still is at full HP, but he's got to get through this Incineroar that just set up the sun.
Yeah, in the Incineroar, we got to see just how much damage it was doing, and I feel like there has been a lot of Incineroars throughout this competition that are not scared of going for this Dynamax because they have a bit more power behind them instead of being so bulky, so defensive, that they're able to be hitting off these big moves. Don't know necessarily how this one is trained, but that's definitely something for both of these trainers to keep in mind going into this turn. Parting shot into the Gastrodon, an opportunity for a pivot from the other end, maybe expecting a swap, maybe just making sure there's no Max Scar, making sure it's safe, but regardless, an opportunity for Paul to bring something else in.
Yeah, once the Gastrodon wakes up, it is going to be doing less damage there. Don't know if that's going to be the second turn or not, but that will be helpful for Paul.
And it'll be the Palkia joining the field. We're going to see where this Max Flare is targeting into the Calyrex. It's been full HP so far, and that is about to change. The super effective hit in the sun will deal a bunch of damage. Glacial Lance in response, not going to pick up either KO, but bringing the Gastrodon right down low into the red.
So that Gastrodon is really low, and at this point, another Glacial Lance would be able to knock it out. Seeing the parting shot into the Gastrodon, where it is typically not seen as much of an offensive threat compared to parting shotting the Incineroar that currently had Max Flare available to it in the sun, targeting your Calyrex. Paul deciding the Gastrodon was much more of an issue for when it does wake up. But now that the Dynamax is over on Eduardo's side, it could be Paul's chance to respond with the Dynamax, on his own here, as he is, finally down in the Pokemon count 4-3 after all these turns.
It's been a game that's been drawn out, that's for sure, as both trainers are looking to take this advantage heading into Game 2 with the game under their belt. And now that Dynamax is completely over for Eduardo, this is the opportunity for this Palkia to make their appearance. And there's something to be said about these staggered Dynamaxes. If you can get through your opponent's Dynamax quite well without taking too much damage, and only one Pokemon is fine, then you can deal all this damage back, especially with how much Eduardo's Pokemon have been chipped down. The Max Worm, when hitting into the Incineroar, is going to be enough to grab this KO.
Yeah, and now it's just this Gastrodon who's going to wake up to see its teammate has been knocked out. It's not even going to wake up there. And Calyrex moving last means Paul was resetting up Trick Room for the third time in this Game 1.
I don't blame the Gastrodon. I'd want to stay asleep with everything going on around me as well. A KO finally coming out from Paul Chua into Eduardo's side, and the Trick Room going on again. Things aren't necessarily looking the greatest. You got to keep in mind, too, that one of the Pokemon that Eduardo has in the back is the Zacian that has been so chipped down and is burnt. That could be really difficult. The Calyrex has significantly more health, and it can hit so strong, but the problem is now is the Trick Room that was just set up.
And this is not a great spot for Eduardo's Calyrex Shadow Rider to come into as the Trick Room just got reset up. So it's not even a situation, it's like, let's wait it out, there's only one turn left, I can protect. You're gonna have to take the brunt of these Trick Room turns with your Calyrex, which is very frail and very fast, meaning it's not gonna be moving quickly under the Twisted Dimension. Gastrodon, though, I believe is guaranteed to wake up this turn. I think he had the full max turns of sleep to this point, so that could be beneficial for Edu. But if you take a turn to yawn or go for your Earth Power where you were parting shotted before, it's not going to be as strong as what Paul can do with this Glacial Lance potentially in the under Trick Room.
Sure enough, the Gastrodon is going to wake up, and it's going to try and stay safe and through one of these turns of Dynamax and Trick Room with the Protect. And the Calyrex Shadow Rider, quick to follow. The Glacial Lance is going to be absolutely doing nothing this turn around, and it's going to be what the Palkia can hit through the Protect and the damage it can do. The Max Flare taking advantage of the sun that's already set to get that damage boost and hitting into the protected Calyrex.
And 3 minutes left just flashed up on the screen, so these trainers are now aware that this game has played out for so long that it is almost, the game is trying to force them to get it to an end here. You're going to have to make your decisions much quicker if you've been taking those, maximum up to 45 seconds per turn for your selection, for your whatever you wanted to move on to that turn. You're quickly going to run out of time, and with under 3 minutes left, you don't want to misclick. You don't want to press an attack just because it's faster instead of clicking what is optimal.
I mean, getting to time is a viable win con, but you have to be considerate of the fact that there is a lot of Pokemon that have been chipped down. Sure, at this point in what's on the field right now, you can see the Calyrex is still in the green, but the Zacian in the back is not faring well whatsoever. And if I'm recalling correctly, I think the Incineroar on Paul's side was actually doing pretty okay for itself. Now Calyrex Shadow Rider going to be swapping out, bringing the Zacian in its place. It is so low, it is burned, and at this point, it's trying to just protect the Calyrex Shadow Rider to make use once something goes in your favor, whether it is the Trick Room expiring or whether it's going to be these yawns hitting. One into the Calyrex Ice Rider, but now a round of Glacial Lances. And with time getting slow, any KO is going to be impactful, and that's going to be a double.
Yeah, that Zacian switch-in was just Glacial Lance fodder at this point for Paul. He's able to get the double knockout there, and that is going to be 2 boosts to his attack with Chilling Neigh. Eduardo does not have his Incineroar anymore to intimidate it. Max Flare doesn't matter. Thanks for trying, Palkia. Your teammate already took care of the rest of the field, and now with Eduardo just on the Shadow Rider with 2 turns of Trick Room, Paul has safely wrapped up what has been a grueling Game 1.
Yeah, and we talked about that too, the fact that once these Calyrex were in a position where they could hit a move, that KOs were going to come quick considering the amount of damage that was done. At this point now, the game is basically over. It's 3-1. Even just if you're not going for the KO, the time is going to be way in your benefit because you're going to win off of that win con yourself at this point. For you to just got to think about how you want to approach and try and stop this Trick Room going into game number 2.
And even if you wanted to try to double protect or something these last 2 turns of Trick Room, Paul's not going to give you the time. There's 30 seconds left in the game. It's not like Paul is low on your time here. It doesn't seem or appear like he will run out of time here. And with a 3-1 Pokemon advantage at the end of the clock, you're going to be able to count it out there and count Paul in his favor.
Just a little swap. We can see the time just ticking away in the top of the box. Bringing Incineroar in. I mean, still play safe. Never give your opponent an out. But all things considered, a Glacial Lance from this Calyrex Ice Rider and the boost that it has is going to be dealing the devastating damage to take the KO and take the win the good old traditional way.
Yes, it feels like forever ago when that game started, but we did mention that the most important thing for Paul was to get his Calyrex Ice Rider in a position under Trick Room to sweep with Glacial Lance and get those Chilling Neigh boosts rolling, and that's exactly what it took. Paul, it's 1 down, 1 to go. This time around, though, you can't necessarily rely on a flamethrower burn into the opposing Zacian. If Zacian is not burned this time around, it does much more damage to the Porygon, Amoonguss, everything else that is on Paul's side. So let's see how Eduardo is going to adjust here in this game 2, because if he doesn't make an adjustment, he's going to be watching Paul in the finals tomorrow.
A little adjustment on Paul's end. Instead of that Amoonguss, we talked about how Amoonguss in the lead up against the Calyrex Shadow Rider can be a little weird, but the Porygon 2 fares a lot nicer against it, and an immediate way to just say, hey, I have Trick Room, I can instantly go and set this up. You need to stop me now, or you're going to be playing in my home advantage.
Right, and you have Fake Out from Incineroar as well, so if you wanted, you wouldn't even be able to get the strong damage up, but not actually going for a Fake Out on this turn as the Calyrex moves first.
No, instead maybe a parting shot or a throat chop to be dealing damage into the opposing Calyrex. Completely ignoring the Porygon 2 at this point. It'll be double hit into this Incineroar. The Sacred Sword is going to be enough to grab the KO. But what is really important about this is the Porygon 2 does go for this Trick Room, and this double hit into the Incineroar. Yes, you lost your Incineroar. You now completely get to bring in something to take advantage of this Trick Room, and that is going to be the Calyrex Ice Rider.
But we did get a knockout about 13 turns earlier in this game than we did in, not literally, but you get what I'm saying. But you are right, Sierra. This is a free switch in with 4 turns of Trick Room remaining for the Calyrex and Paul's side. And although, yes, would you have liked to go for the attack into the Calyrex Shadow Rider with Incineroar? Yeah, but that was just a smart adjustment. I like that from Eduardo with the double target. But anytime you go for that, you're going to leave Zacian free to target the Calyrex Ice Rider as well. And I think he has, if he has the Focus Sash, your Foul Play cannot knock it out from full HP.
Well, considering that the Incineroar didn't fake out, could have also been the parting shot, because this looks like the board state that Paul would much rather prefer to have in this Trick Room scenario. The Glacial Lance hitting some damage into the Zacian. The Foul Play to follow up is actually going to hit into the Calyrex Shadow slot, so a very nice protect. Now Behemoth Blade from Zacian. It hasn't taken much damage, and it has 2 targets that don't appreciate this. The Calyrex Ice Rider definitely doesn't. That is a big hit.
That is a very low Calyrex Ice Rider at this point. Stayed relatively healthy for most of the game, and it was able to secure it for Paul at the end of it in the previous one. But now you're so low, any type of attack is going to knock you out. On that turn, the Glacial Lance would have broken the focus sash on Calyrex Shadow Rider, and then Foul Play gets the KO. But Calyrex doesn't get the boost to its attack on that, because then Porygon would have gotten it there. So now he's going to Dynamax this super low HP Pokemon that he knows is at least going to attack first under Trick Room.
Yeah, we talked about Dynamaxing and having that survivability, though at this point, if you can just grab a huge KO with one of these max moves, it could be a way to make sure that you survive through the turn regardless, and that's going to be a Max Quake into the Zacian. It is enough to grab this KO, so it's only going to have to deal with whatever the Calyrex Shadow Rider has throwing at it. Nice little special defense boost should certainly help going up the Calyrex Shadow Rider at the end of the turn, and that's going to be a chilling Nay boost as well.
Yeah, and the Porygon's never even, you can be +6, it doesn't matter because you're never going to get hit by those ghost attacks. But Eerie Impulse is revealed. Instead
of going for the damage, knowing that you can't really get the KO at all, going for another chance to lower the special attack. This is so low at this point, and that is doing no damage. Just barely a tickle. The Calyrex Ice Rider, it had so little health when Dynamaxing, but when this Calyrex Shadow Rider does nothing into it whatsoever, that's going to be enough. Paul knows his numbers. He knew after the special defense boost into the Calyrex, or for the Calyrex Ice Rider, it would be able to take the spread Astral Barrage because of Eerie Impulse. So a very smart play from Paul, knowing that, trusting, honestly, that his Calyrex at such low HP was going to be able to endure that hit. And now you have Gastrodon at full HP, as well as the Calyrex Shadow Rider still having its Focus Sash intact. One way to knock it out would be bring it down to the sash with Max Hailstorm, and then it gets knocked out at the end of the turn, and Eduardo is definitely too scared of that happening. Yeah, it's definitely a Pokemon that prefers the speed, so Incineroar coming in is great. You preserve that, but more importantly, you get this Intimidate down onto the Calyrex Ice Rider, who had previously that chilling Nay boost. Now, primed and ready on the field. It is time for Eduardo to go for a Dynamax of his own. And you'll love to see it here in top 4, the Dynamax Gastrodon. Somebody check on Lou, see if she is okay. There's a Dynamax Gastrodon on the field. She must be elated right now. Check on Lee as well. We got the match of their dreams. Now a Max Quake fired off, and that is going to be enough to pick up this KO onto the Calyrex Ice Rider and make sure that this horse can't do any more damage. Yeah, you're going to get the special defense boost onto both of your Pokemon, which will help if Palkia is that last Pokemon in the back for Paul's side here. Because of Gastrodon Dynamaxing, you got that knockout, and your Pokemon is still full HP. What can Paul do to answer to this? A Foul Play would have been great into the Calyrex Shadow Rider, but at that point, the Incineroar is going to take it so well. Now it's going to be the Amoonguss that is brought in. There's still one more turn of Trick Room and an opportunity to put something to sleep. We got to see last time that the Amoonguss is so slow, and the Gastrodon could have a very unlucky fate considering there's still Spore at Paul's disposal. So Paul actually leaves his second restricted Pokemon in the back this time. He does not have it for game 2. That Amoonguss is the option because of Spore under Trick Room is really good. But actually you're not going to do that this turn because you just want to protect so you don't get hit by a Fake Out. Absolutely fantastic, making sure, yes, I don't want to be on the wrong side of this Fake Out whatsoever. I can't do anything anyways. Might as well stay nice and protected, especially with the Max Quake going its way. That is a turn of Dynamax that is pretty well wasted at this point, though it will be a special defense boost coming out. Now another Foul Play, another chance at a little bit of chip. It's a great move on Porygon 2, but when you don't really have a Pokemon that you can take advantage from, it's really lackluster. And in VGC formats of years past, oftentimes Amoonguss would use a move like Grass Knot or Giga Drain, some type of grass attack for coverage into things like the Gastrodon. But when you have Pollen Puff, you might not have the extra move slot available to you to even have a grass attack to hit this Gastrodon super effectively. So even if you do get the Spore, Eduardo kind of is feeling safe to not be hit in one, or not get knocked out in one turn. They're so safe. That's the double protect, and considering the Flare Blitz hit into that slot, it is amazing. And that is a double target into it. The Max Hailstorm also going to be doing next to nothing. That is a great chance to go for it, and hitting that double protect is going to be paying off in dividends. Now, a chance to reset the Trick Room since it did expire, and that was, I believe, the last turn of Dynamax.
Yeah, but when you have this Amoonguss Porygon 2 is your last two Pokemon for Paul, and this Gastrodon has been recovering up with leftovers, pretty much negating any of the damage you had done to it prior at this point. It's really tough that if Porygon, all it has is Foul Play, and if all Amoonguss has is Pollen Puff, to break through these three Pokemon on Eduardo's side. So, you know, give a lot of credit to Eduardo for this adjustment in game two, excuse me, that double target into the Incineroar to get rid of it, to just know it was too much of a problem last time around.
Considering the Pokemon advantage and everything else going on for Eduardo, and the fact that there's still restricted that play, yeah, great spot, but you've forgotten, where there's a spore, there's a way. That's going to be a sleep hidden into the Gastrodon to try and eliminate what that's capable of doing. Incineroar, though, still being at fairly full strength, is just going to hit this Flare Blitz. A lot of recoil damage done, brings it down to 1 HP, but it is going to be the Citrus Berry to make sure that it's not going to fall victim to the hail.
Yeah, just barely clinging on for Paul. Maybe you'd want to try to save that beneficial turn for you for a game three where it would have helped a little bit more. But you saw the Foul Play did maybe 12, 13, something like that, just barely over double-digit damage to the Incineroar. It's likely knocking or doing more damage by knocking itself out from Flare Blitz recoil than the Foul Play does to it.
Yeah, well, now it's going to be a Protect. The Spore is only going to be working into the Gastrodon, all things considered. And Gastrodon going to fire back with a sleeping move of his own. It's going to be the Yawn into the Porygon 2. Another Foul Play. You talked about how little damage it was doing, and it's going to be doing even less this time around. Throat Chop, safe way to just do that little bit of damage without taking the recoil, but it's just going to be hitting into the protected Pokemon. But it's not going to stop it from being hit with the hail.
Yeah, I think it did about 20 that time around, so it's going to take a while to knock it out. It would probably, in all likelihood, be a combination of Flare Blitz recoil and the Foul Play, and the, you know, hail that could possibly help out there, but typically just the Flare Blitz and Foul Play. Gastrodon is still at full HP throughout this whole time, through the Trick Room, through its turns that it was put to sleep. It has not been worried at all, and Paul, understanding this one, has gotten away from him, and we are going to see that game three.
Yeah, I was excited when I got to see the double protect onto the Amoonguss, but considering just the lack of power coming out from Paul's end at that time, yes, it was cool to have that survivability to make sure it gets it through to the next turn. Try and put yourself in some sort of spot that maybe something can happen, but considering you could only really spore the Gastrodon in that position, considering that you took so much damage from that Flare Blitz and you're just taking that consistent hail damage, it was just not enough in your back pocket to make it to that next part. Now we're going into a game three. Definitely have to think about how this is going to be going into this game two, and the Porygon 2, as great it is for the consistent Trick Room setups, doesn't get to do much else. So we're going to see that adjustment from Paul right in the lead. It is the Amoonguss and the Palkia. Palkia back out to play, facing off against this Incineroar and Calyrex Shadow Rider.
Love this adjustment from Paul because he had so many different options for Trick Room. It doesn't just have to be the Porygon 2 that sets it up. You can have, we even saw the Calyrex set it up in game one at one point, and of course, Palkia as well has that option. So with Amoonguss, you can redirect an attack targeting down the Palkia, or more importantly, you can spore things on the switch. And if the Gastrodon ever wanted to switch in to try to take away a water attack, you can go for the spore and force it to be asleep. And Eduardo on this turn likes being the Calyrex, right? That psychic type that can face down the Amoonguss. We know it's not Focus Sash because we saw the Amoonguss eat its Citrus Berry.
And the Gastrodon you were talking about is going to make an appearance right away, but no spore pressure as the Amoonguss has the Protect instead, meaning this Astral Barrage from Eduardo's Calyrex Shadow Rider is not going to do anything to it at all. The Palkia, a little bit of a different story, but is still going to take the hit considerably well and now gets to fire off a Spatial Rend in retaliation. That is going to be doing considerably more, bringing it down to just under half. That's
over half, and remember in game one, Spatial Rend hardly did anything because Palkia got hit by a Snarl. So it was just not an option for Paul. Here at this point, the Palkia would be a 2-hit KO for Spatial Rend into Calyrex Shadow Rider, and the Trick Room just went up, meaning Palkia is now outspeeding thanks to those twisted dimensions. So if you are Eduardo, just like we saw in the first 2 games, this is not the part of the game that Calyrex Shadow Rider wants to be on. Potentially switching that out, but that could be a very telegraphed switch, because then whatever you go into that second slot would be taking the brunt of the damage headed towards the Calyrex direction.
At this point, the Zacian coming out to play, but since the Amoonguss protected and the Palkia just went for a attack, it's time for Eduardo to potentially be able to apply pressure back on and make sure that Trick Room can't get set up. But Gastrodon instead opting for that protect. Spatial Rend, it's not going to do anything into the Zacian. Such a nice swapping, but it's also going to be covered because now Spore from the Amoonguss can put it right to sleep.
Yes, that's a great cover there for Paul, because one, either Spatial Rend knocks out the Gastrodon, or excuse me, the Calyrex, and then the Spore then has to hit the other side of it, so you're protected either way. Or two, something switches in, like the Zacian here, and has to eat a Spore. Because it just switched on this turn, Zacian has to take this first turn of sleep before he can try to wake up on the next couple of turns.
Now the Amoonguss, it's done its job, it's put something to bed, and now it's going to swap out for the Incineroar to come in its place and get the Intimidate onto the Zacian. It's sleeping, it doesn't have its attack boost, it is having a bad day. The Spatial Rend once again, this time of course though, targeting into the Gastrodon slot. Paul Chua very comfortable this time around and not going and setting things up. A Yawn back into retaliation into this Incineroar. Now Incineroar has to swap out or it's going to risk falling asleep.
And that Spatial Rend was some solid damage. It was okay. Not a 2-hit KO into the Gastrodon. And then with the amount of leftovers recovery you can get from protecting and just not being targeted, it's not even a 3-hit KO, barring a critical hit there. So the Gastrodon is not too threatened by the Palkia, as well as obviously the Zacian, because you can't get hit by those dragon attacks. You can't get hit by water attacks either, thanks to the Storm Drain ability.
Zacian waking up pretty quickly, and it'll be a Sacred Sword fired into the Palkia slot as it continues to get chipped away. At least a Flamethrower. It's going to do more than we got to see in previous games, but fishing for the burn is not going to find one. You're either doing damage, or if it woke up, you're trying to go for the burn, so at least a net neutral. This Gastrodon's going to try and keep pinning the slot down, though. Another Yawn fired off.
Yeah, the Yawn is very frustrating to deal with. Obviously, it's not as much immediate power as Spore provides to you that immediately puts the Pokemon to sleep, but if you're putting your opponent in a spot, like, yes, if you want to attack me, I'm going to punish you by forcing you to go to sleep at the end of the turn. And I don't know, how Paul values letting his Pokemon go to sleep just to get some damage.
Eduardo definitely valuing not having his Zacian go down, or at least attempted for that burn from the Flamethrower. Is going to bring the Calyrex Shadow Rider in place. And really good swap as well, considering the Incineroar hitting the field and going for this Intimidate. Gastrodon now with the Earth Power can hit a lot of damage into this freshly Incineroar spot. But now it's taken a while, but this Palkia feeling great and just setting Trick Room and not going for the Spatial Rends anymore.
That Earth Power actually did some pretty solid damage there into the Incineroar. So obviously another one would be able to knock it out. And what happened last game? The Gastrodon actually took advantage of being in Trick Room and being the slowest Pokemon on the field. So right now it would be targeting first. If you wanted to go for an Earth Power into the Incineroar potentially, or an attack into the Palkia, it would be attacking before either of those can.
At this point, it's getting through the Trick Room. And Calyrex Shadow Rider, knowing that, is just going to protect. Earth Power to just keep consistently chipping away. The Pokemon on Paul's end are getting lower and lower. And you're going to have to be careful of that once the Trick Room expires, or if Eduardo gets in a position comfortable enough to keep firing off attacks. The Gastrodon going to be doing less, though, in following turns, considering that it was hit with this parting shot.
Yeah, and the Amoonguss comes in, who's typically slower than the Gastrodon. So before I was worried for Paul, if you ever tried to attack, the Earth Power from Gastrodon would be able to knock out the Palkia. But now, if Amoonguss wants to use a Spore on this turn, that would be able to stop the Gastrodon. So a very nice switch from Paul, having that pressure, having that Spore pressure, saying, mine's more immediate. I'm going to put you to sleep right now. Not your Yawn, not at the end of the turn. It's going to be a bigger struggle for Eduardo to deal with there. And his Calyrex Shadow Rider is sitting here on the field with 3 turns of Trick Room, and at any point could get hit by any attack and probably get knocked out. And that's why it's too dangerous for Calyrex to stay on the field.
Yeah, you waste a turn going for the swap and bring something else in that is much going to better fare. But keeping in mind that Calyrex Shadow Rider leaving means that the unnerve ability is gone, and this Palkia can get that berry recovery just that little bit. A nice, considering how low it was in HP before that. Incineroar coming out, but look at that, even more survivability. The Calyrex leaving, you got the berry. Now you have the Pollen Puff, making sure you are set up and ready to go. Yawn into the Amoonguss. It'll have to leave the field after this turn, but look at that. Spatial Ren miss.
A disastrous miss for Paul, because you need every bit of chip damage you can get in this game. The game he won in game 1 was because everything was brought so low that it let Calyrex Ice Rider just take care of the rest of their HP. So that Spatial Ren missing, was it going to do massive amounts of damage? No, but you need every bit you can there. And I love that Palkia started the turn at like 20 HP and ends it at almost full HP from its berry and the Pollen Puff.
Yeah, the situation on Paul's end looked kind of weird with how low the Pokemon were, and then you take another glance and everything's at full again and looking pretty comfortable. It is going to be a pin slot though yet again. We talked about the Spore being able to put things to sleep immediately, but the power of Yawn is making sure you're forcing your opponent into consistently swapping the slot, making sure that they cannot get comfortable with their board state, which is huge against this Trick Room team. Now a parting shot, lower the attack that the Pokemon be able to do, and Calyrex Shadow Rider hitting the field once again.
Yeah, Calyrex is going to come out here. We still have not gotten a knockout from either side here, so this game 2 or game 3 is looking much closer to like game 1. And in game 1, Paul came out victorious in that one.
Flamethrower hitting into the Calyrex Shadow Rider, just that little bit of damage done. Maybe trying to catch something else in, but at this point, it's one more turn of Trick Room, and Calyrex, we've seen that protect that it has, assuming you can protect right past and try and put some pressure on right after this turn ends.
And if you try to fish for burns, also, like if you were to burn the Gastrodon or something like that, that would negate the leftovers recovery there, so it would keep it at its consistent health. It would keep it at the same spot that you want it. This Calyrex is so low at this point. There's one turn of Trick Room left for it, so this is a spot for Eduardo. He can protect on the Calyrex Shadow Rider to keep it safe, because you don't want to take any damage from either the Calyrex or Calyrex Ice Rider or the Palkia. But again, with how high of health Paul's Pokemon have there, once Trick Room expires, he can just attempt to set it up again, potentially the next turn.
Yeah, so it'll be huge to see what this Gastrodon is able to do to try to deny that opportunity, since it does have a chance. Another switch coming out. Both Calyrex decide to peace out, and the Zacian comes back in. The Flamethrower did target into the spot last time around, so potentially a little bit of a dangerous swap, so we'll have to see exactly where things are targeted into. Sure enough, the Yawn into the Palkia to ensure that once this turn is done, the Palkia won't be able to hit again. But look at that, a great swap with the Zacian. It could have been the Flamethrower, but the Zacian, it loves coming in, because that Spatial Ren's going to do nothing.
Yeah, that's 2 great turns in a row from Eduardo, not getting hit by the Flamethrower from the Zacian in the previous turn, maybe expecting that switch in, and now you actually do switch it in, and he changes it to the Dragon attack, which as a Fairy type, you are immune. Now Paul's not even going to be able to Trick Room, as Palkia had to switch out because of the Yawn.
And because there had to be a swap over on Paul's end to make sure that Palkia wasn't falling to sleep, Eduardo feeling confident in setting up this substitute and making sure the Zacian can stick around. The parting shot, though, Gastrodon, the Incineroar will still have a swap to switch out.
Yeah, you're going to have to bring in that Palkia back on this turn, so it kind of left the field and entered immediately right back at the same time. That's what Incineroar was able to do, help you pivot so much.
Yeah, and Yawn going into the Amoonguss slot. Now decision to be made. We've seen that after these Yawns, that Paul swaps the Pokemon out. There is, though, the opportunity in this turn to go, if you value the Trick Room so much, to still go and set that up and no pivot, since you do have potential redirection, or even just going for a Spore to try and put something to sleep. Behemoth Blade, no swaps anywhere. Behemoth Blade hitting into that Amoonguss. A lot of damage, but still holding on with that 26. Amoonguss known for being bulky, and with the berry, can recover some of that health.
Yeah, and if Gastrodon wants to double target into that slot, the extra health from the Citrus Berry might be able to let it hang on. Flamethrower, though, not Trick Room.
Yeah, we got to see earlier on in the match that Paul really valued going for these hits and being able to break this substitute. And Amoonguss hasn't moved yet. You break the substitute and could potentially go for a spore, which could be disastrous, and that is how it's going to be. There's going to be the yawn, but the spore taking effect right now is going to put the Zacian right to sleep.
That spore is going to be huge because Zacian already attacked this turn. So it's gonna be asleep, and now Paul does not have to worry about the mind games of if I trick room and if he hits me there, I might be in a difficult spot. So Paul is not threatened by the Zacian with a play rough into the Palkia slot. At this point, you would be sacrificing your Palkia from being awake to set up trick room, but it might be what Paul needs to win the game.
It's really how much you value getting that trick room up as opposed to going to sleep. So since the yawn was into that slot and your Amoonguss is already asleep, you want to make sure that after you set it, you have a way to capitalize off of it. And it's assumingly, considering the Zacian went to sleep first, it is going to wake up before you do. So just bringing the Incineroar back in. But Gastrodon, it's not going to have that ability to put the yawn pressure on anymore since the Calyrex will join the field. Since there's no trick room, this could be that moment for it.
And Incineroar cannot fake out Calyrex Shadow Rider as a ghost type here, so even the next turn, you wouldn't be able to stop it from clicking the Astro Barrage. Look at both of Paul's Pokemon on the field. They're both under half HP. It would be a resisted hit into Incineroar, but neutral on the Amoonguss there. So if you have that super fast Astro Barrage, this could be the moment Eduardo was waiting for his Grim Neigh boost to steamroll the match.
And considering that Eduardo has all of that pressure and capability, the Amoonguss has to swap out. You get that regenerator and bring the Palkia back in. We've got to see how it did pressure-wise before, but Paul, this is the time. This is where we're going to see that Dynamax. We got to see Dynamax and Incineroar earlier on in the day, and now it's Paul's turn.
Yeah, Paul's going to respond with his own Dynamax, Incineroar. And if this is one way, if you're worried about Astro Barrage being enough to knock you out because you're so low HP, doubling that HP stat can help you secure that you don't get KO'd.
Yeah, doing very little to both Pokemon, all things considered. But Zacian with the Wake Up and the Sacred Sword, that is going to be enough. No Dynamax for Paul, and that is going to be devastating because that had to put in the work. It had the max flares, had the max darkness, and now your Dynamax is gone. Eduardo still has the speed tier in his favor, and this Pokemon is still asleep. But so the Amoonguss in the back as the Calyrex Ice Rider finally makes its appearance on the board.
Both of these trainers banked their games on does Zacian wake up? Obviously, Eduardo said, yes, I'll wake up. I'll knock him out before he can get me. And then Paul saying, no, I need him to stay asleep for one more turn. And that is not going to happen for Paul. So now they're still, at this point, you have your two restricted. Calyrex Ice Rider is at full HP, but not getting any value whatsoever out of your Dynamax, and Eduardo can now use his this game.
Yeah, and this Calyrex Shadow Rider, it is so fast, and it is in an opportune moment, considering both Pokemon from Eduardo can hit so fast and just deal with what Paul has on his end of the field. 48 HP, doubled, looks not as bad. It's not great, but it might just be enough to get the job done. It'll be the Max Phantasm now hitting into this Palkia. That's going to be one KO to start the turn off, and now the Zacian being able to target next and seeing just what is on the opposite side of the field. Well, it is not going to be going down well whatsoever. Grim Neigh boost just to get that little bit more. At least the White Herb make it so, you know, it's not going to be doing the millions and a half damage, but this is still not going to be pretty whatsoever. There it is. Still, the one-hit KO, and now it's only a sleeping Amoonguss. The critical hit, the Behemoth Blade, it is too strong. Eduardo, that's going to be moving on to finals.
Yeah, we've seen the Amoonguss does not do anything, and it's 4v1, obviously, too. But that critical hit in the prior games, Calyrex Ice Rider was able to take the Behemoth Blade at like 43 HP remaining. So the critical hit proving very crucial for Eduardo here, and that is a massive victory.
Eduardo Cunha moving on into the grand finals here at the London Pokémon World Championships. Took us all the way into Game 3, but a phenomenal battle by both of these trainers.